Consider you are sitting throughout from a person you knew, your first class pal, your companion, maybe even a colleague. 1 second, they seem actual, but you then seize a glimpse of something deeper, something hidden. What if you may uncover their actual individual, their private motivations with simply 2 easy questions? Questions so effective, stimulated by way of Carl Jung, that they peel again the masks we all wear and screen who a person clearly is, sometimes even to themselves. In this video, you are approximately to discover Carl Jung's mental secret to reading humans like an open e-book. No longer handiest will you research these game-changing questions. However, you will also see how they are able to transform the way you understand others and even yourself. Through the stop, you'll have sensible equipment to navigate relationships, spot red flags, and unlock a deeper level of self-recognition. Live with me due to the fact those questions aren't pretty much others. They may be a reflect on your own soul. Ready to dive into the thoughts of Carl Jung and see what is genuinely underneath the floor. Permits get commenced. Picture this. Sarah, a 30-tour antique advertising and marketing manager, walks into every assembly with a radiant smile, sharp insights, and an air of unshakable confidence. To her colleagues, she's the epitome of fulfillment. Constantly polished, constantly on top of things. However, behind closed doors, Sarah wrestles with a mystery P. She's frightened of failure. Haunted via a nagging voice that whispers she's now not suitable enough, she pushes it down, buries it deep, and keeps up the correct facade. Sound familiar? Perhaps you have met a person like Sarah. Or maybe, just perhaps, you felt this manner yourself. That is in which Carl Jung, the mythical Swiss psychologist, comes in. Carl Jung spent many years unraveling the mysteries of the human psyche, and he discovered something profound. We all wear a mask. He known as it the persona, the cautiously crafted version of ourselves we display the world. It is the smile we flash whilst we're apprehensive, the confidence we faux while we are scared, or the politeness we muster while we're boiling inner. The persona isn't a lie, it's a tool, a way to navigate social expectations and protect our inner selves. But here's the catch. Below that mask lies something a ways extra revealing. The shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or shove into the unconscious. It is now not just our flaws or insecurities. The shadow holds everything we've got determined. Would not suit our photo, our suppressed anger, our hidden fears, even our untapped creativity or buried passions. For Sarah, her shadow is that fear of failure, the vulnerability she refuses to acknowledge. As a substitute, she initiatives and photo of perfection, however at a value. The greater she hides her shadow, the more it controls her from behind the scenes. Carl Jung believed that information, the interaction between the personality and the shadow, is the important thing to unlocking who we surely are and who others are. Maximum people go through life ignorant of our shadow, letting it shape our reactions, our judgments, and even our relationships without ever figuring out it. Have you ever snapped at someone for no cause? Simplest to marvel why you acquire so upset or judge someone harshly. Most effective to later understand you proportion the identical trait. This is your shadow speaking. Permits dive deeper with Sarah's story. At work, Sarah cannot stand her colleague Mike. He's usually late, leave out deadlines, and seems to coast through lifestyles without a care. To Sarah, he's the definition of lazy, and it drives her up the wall. However, right here's what Carl Jung would point out. Sarah's reaction to Mike isn't always just about him. It is a clue to her personal shadow. Deep down, Sarah envies Mike's carefree mindset. She spent years suppressing her very own choice to loosen up, to allow move of the relentless power to prove herself. Her irritation with Mike is her shadow screaming for interest, but she doesn't see it. As an alternative, she doubles down on her personality, running more difficult to prove she's not anything like him. That is what Carl Jung known as projection. Whilst we reject parts of ourselves, we unconsciously see those developments in others, and we choose them for it. The louder we criticize someone, the much more likely it is a signal of something we've buried in ourselves. Reflect on consideration on it. What form of individual receives below your skin? The noid, all who interrupts each communique. The colleague who in no way takes duty. Carl Jung would say the one's reactions are reflecting elements of you which you've driven away, but here's where it receives charming. The shadow isn't always just a repository of bad developments. Carl Jung located it additionally holds our untapped capability. Maybe you have suppressed your creativity because you have been advised it is impractical. Maybe you have buried your ambition because you didn't need to seem selfish. The shadow contains both the traits we're ashamed of and the items we are too afraid to include. For Sarah, her shadow isn't always simply her fear of failure. It is also her longing to be real, to let cross of the need to be ideal and embody her true self. So, hermits, pause for a second. Have you ever felt like you're wearing a mask, playing a function to fit in at work, with pals, or maybe with own family? Maybe you've got hidden your proper feelings to keep away from war, or driven down your desires because they felt too large. It truly is your persona at work, and it's everyday. However, Carl Jung's genius turned into in displaying us that the actual boom happens while we dare to peek in the back of that masks. When we acknowledge our shadow, we don't just recognize ourselves better, we begin to see others more sincerely. 2. Here's a simple exercising to begin exploring your personal shadow. Consider a person who irritates you, a person who virtually pushes your buttons. Write down the trait that bothers you maximum, approximately them. Is it their conceitedness, their neediness, their dishonesty? Now, here's the difficult part. Ask yourself, in which may this trait live in me, even just a little? It's no longer about guilt or disgrace. It's approximately curiosity. Carl Jung believed that spotting our shadow is the first step to turning into whole. What he referred to as individuation, the adventure for your authentic self. Transition to the following bankruptcy. Now that we've exposed the hidden dance between the personality and the shadow, you're equipped to examine the primary of Carl Jung's effective questions. This question will help you spot straight through someone's persona to the shadow underneath, and it would simply monitor something surprising about yourself. 2. Stay with me as we dive into the first query that unlocks the truth approximately everybody's character. Imagine you are at a coffee store catching up with a pal. The communique is mild, but something's off. They point out someone they work with, a guy who's always bragging approximately his accomplishments. Your buddy rolls their eyes announcing, "I cannot stand humans like that. They may be so full of themselves." You nod, however, then you definitely pause. What if that response is telling you more about your buddy than the coworker they are complaining approximately? This is where Klong's first query comes. In a query so deceptively easy, it could reduce via the noise and display someone's genuine individual. Carl Jung's first query is this: what type of person do you genuinely cannot stand? Before everything, look, it seems like an informal icebreaker, something you'd toss out at a party, but Carl Jung, the master of the human psyche, knew this question turned into a psychological landmine. It does not simply monitor what a person dislikes, it shines a spotlight on their shadow, that hidden part of themselves they have got buried deep. Hermits unpack why this query is so powerful and how it is able to alternate the manner you see others and yourself. Carl Jung discovered that what we hate maximum in others is often a mirror of what we reject in ourselves. He known as this projection, a procedure wherein we unconsciously push our disowned traits onto a person else. Whilst your buddy trashes their smug coworker, they may be now not just talking approximately that guy. They're revealing something approximately their personal internal global. Perhaps they may be insecure approximately their very own achievements. Or maybe they have suppressed their personal need or reputation. The stronger their response, the nearer you are attending to their shadow. Allows bring this to lifestyles with a story. Meet John, a 40-year vintage software program engineer who prides himself on his painting's ethic. He's the guy who's continually at the office early, double-checking each element, making sure the whole thing's ideal. But there may be one man or woman who drives John up the wall, his teammate Lisa. Lisa's continually overdue to conferences, submits her work at the final minute, and appears to skate via without a care to John. She's the poster child for laziness, and he can't forestall complaining approximately her. Humans like that simply don't belong in an expert environment, he says, his voice dripping with frustration. But here's what Carl Jung could ask John. Why does Lisa bother you so much? If John had been honest, he would possibly admit that Lisa's carefree mindset hits a nerve because it reminds him of something he has buried. Deep down, John envies her potential to allow move, to no longer be chained to perfectionism. He spent years suppressing his very own preference to loosen up, to take a damage because he believes it is susceptible. His inflammation with Lisa isn't absolutely about her. It is about the part of himself he has rejected. Carl Jung could say John's projecting his shadow onto Lisa, and that is why her behavior seems like a personal assault. That is wherein the magic of Carl Jung's first query lies. When a person solutions it, they're no longer simply telling you about the people they dislike. They may be handing you a street map to their mental blind spots. The traits they cannot stand are often the ones they've disowned in themselves. And the more emotional they get, whether or not it is anger, disgust, or exasperation, the clearer it becomes which you've hit a nerve. Carl Jung put it exceptional. The entirety that irritates us approximately others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Let's do this out. Consider a person for your existence who drives you crazy. Maybe it is a pal who's constantly gambling the victim, blaming all people else for their troubles, or a coworker who is ruthlessly formidable, stepping over others to get beforehand. Now ask yourself, what does my response say about me? If you cannot stand the sufferer mentality, maybe you've got suppressed your very own feelings of vulnerability, afraid to confess when you want assist. If ambition makes your pores and skin move slowly, perhaps you've buried your personal drive to succeed as it felt too egocentric. This isn't approximately judging yourself. It is about getting curious. Carl Jung believed that recognizing those projections is the first step to expertise who you actually are. But here's where it gets even more thrilling. The shadow isn't always pretty much poor tendencies. Carl Jung determined that it also holds the effective features we have rejected. Allows move lower back. John, his disdain for Lisa's laziness may point to a hidden power he is afraid to embrace, like the potential to prioritize his properly, being over paintings. Maybe John's been conditioned to accept as true with that relaxation is an indication of failure. So, he is pushed that a part of himself into the shadow. When he sees Lisa reciting so freely, it stirs up both envy and resentment. Carl Jung might say that Lisa's not only a cause, she's the instructor, showing John what he wishes to reclaim in himself. Now, allows flip the script. This query is not only for reading others. It is a device for self-discovery. Attempt answering it yourself. Who's the sort of character you definitely cannot stand? Is it the loud, attention-seeking type? The passive competitive manipulator? The chronically disorganized mess? Something you choose? Carl Jung could urge you to look deeper. That trait you hate is probably a clue to something you've got hidden from yourself. Perhaps a fear, a deceit, or maybe a talent you've got in no way let shine. The shadow does not simply maintain your weaknesses. It holds your untapped capability. Here's a sensible way to apply this query for your life. Next time you're talking to a person, a friend, a member of the family, or maybe a stranger, ask them, what type of character do you just can't stand? Then listen cautiously. Don't simply listen their phrases. Watch their tone, their frame language, their energy. If they get heated, if their voice rises or their eyes slim, you are in all likelihood brushing up against their shadow. For example, if a person says they hate boastful know-it-alls, Carl Jung could advise they is probably wrestling with their personal need to sense equipped or on top of things. If they despise needy human beings, they might be denying their very own want for connection. However, be careful how you use this insight. Carl Jung warned that seeing a person's shadow offers you energy no longer to govern, but to apprehend. Using this question to judge or control others is what he called psychological poison. Alternatively, use it to construct empathy. Whilst you see someone's shadow, you are seeing their humanity, the elements they're afraid to reveal the arena. And when you recognize that, you could hook up with them on a deeper, greater real degree. Let's wrap this up with a task over the subsequent week. Pay attention to the individuals who aggravate you. Write down what bothers you approximately them, and then ask yourself, wherein does this trait stay in me? Do not shrink back from the discomfort. Carl Jung believed that facing your shadow is the gateway to individuation, the process of turning into your actual entire self. With the aid of asking this query of others and yourself, you're not just uncovering hidden truths. You're taking step one closer to a greater actual life. Now, we've got visible how the first query reveals the shadow through projection. However, Carl Jung's second question takes things even deeper, exposing how someone handles one of the maximum vulnerable parts of being person incorrect. Stay with me as we dive into the following question, one so as to show you ways people's actual individual shines or crumbles when their ego is positioned to the take a look at. Allows set the scene. You're at a family dinner and your cousin Emma is passionately arguing her point about a recent selection at paintings. She's satisfied she's right. Her voice is loud. Here, gesture is confident. However, then someone factors out a flaw in her good judgment, and the room goes quiet. Emma doubles down, deflecting blame and insisting she's nonetheless right. Ever been in a moment like that? Or perhaps you have been, Emma, so sure of yourself until the reality hits, and suddenly you're scrambling to store face. That is in which Klong's 2D question is available in. A question that doesn't just display someone's individual, but exposes how they manage one of existence's hardest demanding situations being wrong. Carl Jung's 2D query is, inform me about a time whilst you have been simply sure you have been proper. However, it became out you were wrong. It sounds honest. However, don't be fooled. This question is a psychological scalpel, slicing via the layers of someone's ego to expose their proper adulthood. Carl Jung believed that how we cope with being incorrect while our cautiously built photograph of ourselves is challenged, says greater about who we're than any fulfillment or achievement. Permits dive into why this question is so revealing and how it is able to transform the manner you see others and yourself. Carl Jung located that being wrong threatens what he referred to as the ego best, the version of ourselves we hold up as capable, clever, and in control. When that image cracks, maximum folks scramble to guard it. We might deny we have been wrong, blame others, or downplay the error. But Carl Jung found that the manner a person responds to this query reveals their psychological power or fragility. It is not about the error itself, it is about how they manner it. Do they fall apart, deflect, or grow? It truly is in which the truth lies. Permits bring this to life with Emma's story. Emma, a 35er antique task supervisor, prides herself on her leadership abilities. She's acknowledged for making short confid and her team trusts her judgment. But 12 months ago, she spearheaded a chief venture. Sure it would be a game changer for her employer, she disregarded warnings from her group. Satisfied they had been simply being careful when the venture failed spectacularly, costing the corporation hundreds. Emma's world shook. At the beginning, she blamed her crew, claiming they did not execute her vision nicely, but deep down, she knew she'd misjudged the scenario. Right here's in which Carl Jung's perception kicks in. Whilst you ask a person to percentage a time they have been wrong, their reaction, well known, shows how they handle their ego ideal being challenged. Carl Jung identified numerous defense mechanisms human beings used to shield themselves: denial, I wasn't certainly incorrect, things just modified; explanation, it made sense at the time; projection, it became a person else's fault; or minimization, it wasn't a large deal anyway. Emma's preliminary response turned into projection. She blamed her crew to protect herself. Picture. However, what makes Emma's tale compelling is what came about next. After weeks of defensiveness, Emma took a hard observe herself. She admitted her mistake to her group, apologized it, and requested for comments on how to avoid similar errors. This wasn't easy. It intended facing her fear of searching incompetent. However, Carl Jung would say Emma confirmed mental adulthood by way of doing what he known as protecting the anxiety of opposites. She popular her mistake without letting it damage her sense of self. This ability to sit with discomfort, to include fallibility without collapsing, is what Carl Jung saw as a hallmark of a strong character. Now permits make this non-public. Reflect on consideration on a time you have been sure you have been right. Best to realize you had been incorrect. Perhaps you argued with a chum over something trivial, or you decided at paintings that backfired. How did you react? Did you dig to your heels, deflect blame, or brush it off? Or did you pause, mirror, and learn something about yourself? Carl Jung believed that folks that can face their errors with curiosity instead of defensiveness are at the path to individuation, the system of turning into their authentic selves. It's not about being best. It is approximately being real. Here's why this question is so powerful. While you ask a person to percentage a moment they have been incorrect, you are no longer just soliciting for a story. You are trying out their relationship with their personal fallibility. Carl Jung observed that human beings' responses fall into patterns. Some don't forget a single time they were wrong, which Carl Junger known as psychological inflation, an ego so inflexible it cannot tolerate imperfection. Others immediately blame outside elements, revealing an outside locus of manage, in which they see lifestyles as something that takes place to them, not via them, but the rare ones, incorporated ones, can share a tale of being incorrect with honesty, even humor. They have learned to see mistakes as possibilities, now not threats. Allows try this in action. Consider you ask a coworker this question all through a lunch damage. They chuckle nervously and say, "Oh, I do not know. I'm usually quite spot on." It really is a red flag. Carl Jung would say they may be probably in denial, clinging to an inflated ego that cannot admit fault. Or perhaps they percentage a story however fast shift to blaming someone else. I thought the consumer was on board, but they completely misled me. It really is projection at work, dodging responsibility, but if they percentage a proper story, perhaps chuckling as they admit, "I used to be so sure, however I absolutely neglected the mark." You're likely speak me to a person with mental depth, a person who's achieved the work of integrating their flaws. This question isn't only for studying others. It's a mirror for you. Attempt answering it yourself. Whilst changed into the closing time you had been incorrect. Perhaps you had been sure, your friend changed into ghosting you, most effective to analyze. They have been going via a tough time, otherwise you pushed for a plan at work that flopped. How did you take care of it? Did you experience your ego sting, or did you spot it as a chance to grow? Carl Jung's perception here is profound. Your imaginative and prescient turns into clear whilst you look at your coronary heart. Admitting you're incorrect would not make you vulnerable, it makes you complete. Here's a realistic manner to apply this question. Next time you're in a conversation, whether it is with a pal, a partner, or maybe your boss, ask them to proportion a time they have been incorrect. Watch how they respond. Do they get shielding? change the situation, or giggle it off. Their response will let you know more about their individual than years of informal commentary. And when you solution the question yourself, be sincere. Notice in case you're tempted to sugarcoat or deflect. It's your ego talking. Carl Jung would inspire you to lean into the discomfort due to the fact it's wherein growth occurs. However, there may be a deeper layer to this. Carl Jung believed that dealing with our fallibility isn't always pretty much non-public growth. It's about building higher relationships. While you can admit your mistakes, you create space for others to do the same. Emma's story didn't quit together with her failure by owning her mistake. She earned her crew's respect and fostered a way of life of honesty,